They say spring is a time of renewal, but for some of us, it's when the darkness crept in. These aren't stories of blooming flowers. They're memories I wish I could forget. I'm a single man in my mid-30s. This story took place a few years ago during a really rough patch in my life. I had just gone through a breakup with my girlfriend of 5 years, the woman I truly believed I'd marry and build a future with. To say I was a mess would be an understatement. Mentally, I was wrecked. I spent weeks feeling empty, barely functioning. I'd go to work in silence, come home, and collapse in bed without speaking to a soul. My weekends were even darker. I'd skip meals, avoid leaving the house, and lose myself in endless movie marathons. Not that I remembered any of them, but I won't dwell too much on that now. I'm in a better place these days. Still, I sometimes think about the life I could have had if things had gone differently. It was a Saturday night. I was sunk into the couch, motionless, mechanically starting another movie. I don't even recall what it was. Just another generic action flick that left no impression. I was in my room, second floor where I keep my couch and TV, so I rarely watch anything anywhere else. I glanced at my phone and saw it was just after 9 p.m. My mom was calling again, the fourth time that day. Though I didn't want to ignore her, I let it ring. I couldn't handle her usual concerned questions about whether I'd eaten or gotten fresh air. Eventually, I backed out to the movie menu, still uninterested. I picked some random horror movie with a blurry thumbnail, something I figured would lull me to sleep. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the audio was terrible. Dialogue was barely audible, forcing me to crank up the volume, only to get blasted by sound effects seconds later. Strangely, I kept watching. I think I was too drained to bother finding something else. Then I began to hear this odd noise, a sharp metallic clang, like metal hitting cement. The weird part, it didn't match the visuals. No metal, no factories, no logical source. It repeated every minute, same tone, same volume. It felt like a production glitch. The poor audio mixing made it more noticeable. I was both annoyed and weirdly intrigued. I wanted to see just how bad this movie could get. At some point, I got up to use the bathroom, and oddly enough, paused the movie. When I sat back down and hovered over the play button, the sound came again. The same metallic clang, clear as day. But the movie was paused. I froze, staring at the silent screen. No way that sound had come from the TV. I listened closely, wondering if my imagination was playing tricks. About 45 seconds later, the sound came again. That's when I panicked. I grabbed a knife from my desk and began checking the entire house, room by room. Nothing. No one. No broken windows, nothing out of place. As I headed back upstairs, still uneasy, I heard the sound again. Softer this time. It had to be coming from my room. The same room I had been sitting in. It made no sense. Then it hit me. I had a few windows open. It was spring. The weather was warming up, so I'd been cracking the windows open at night. Suddenly, it occurred to me, maybe the sound wasn't from inside. Maybe it was outside all along. That idea chilled me even more. I peeked through the curtain toward the backyard. And that's when I saw it. One of the deck chairs was out in the middle of the lawn, and standing next to it was a child. A small kid, maybe 20 feet away. I couldn't make out his face in the dark, but his size made it obvious. Definitely not an adult. He was holding something long, possibly PVC pipe, which explained the sound. As soon as he noticed me looking, he struck the pipe against the chair again. I jumped back from the window, heart pounding. It felt silly being scared of a kid, but the situation was surreal. Why was a child standing outside my house like that? He okay? Then I realized he must have been out there for nearly an hour. That made it even worse. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself maybe he was lost. Maybe he wandered away from home and didn't know what to do. I turned on the porch light and walked to the back door. Just as I grabbed the doorknob, I paused. Something felt off. If he really needed help, why hadn't he knocked or called out? And why keep hitting that chair for so long? It made no sense. My gut screamed not to open the door. I listened. I crept over to a small window next to the door, lifted the blind ever so slightly, and looked outside. 2 men, dressed in black, were crouched by the back door, ready to pounce. One of them looked up and locked eyes with me. I dropped the blind and instantly called 911. While I was racing upstairs, I heard them pounding on the door. Moments later, a crash. They were inside. Footsteps below. Then footsteps climbing the stairs. I locked myself in the bathroom, barely able to breathe. The doorknob shifted slightly, followed by a loud kick. I screamed that the police were coming. Whoever was outside ran. Moments later, a door slammed, then silence. Police arrived soon after. I told them everything. With no security footage or clear details, they didn't have much to go on. But the part that disturbed them most was the child. The officers said that kind of manipulation suggested something far worse. People capable of much more than a break-in. That's what stuck with me. I still think about that kid. No matter what theory I consider, none of them feel right. Police said it was probably a random target, but it all felt way too calculated. Nothing has happened since, but I moved, and I truly hope that child is safe, though I doubt it. It's the year 2024 as I write this. I'm in my final semester, just a few weeks away from graduating. Let me start with a quick rant. I've never understood how most of my friends make it through those wild, week-long spring break trips to places like Miami. I just can't handle that kind of thing. For me, spring break has always been a chance to go back home and decompress. And this year was no exception. I planned to stay offline and away from all the academic stress and unnecessary drama. Honestly, I was still fuming because I had just submitted what I thought was a perfect request to have my midterm regraded, only for my lousy TA to reject it for no reason at all. Anyway, it was a Monday morning. I didn't have any set plans except to hit the gym. Working out in the morning has always made me feel like my life's somewhat together. So even though I had nothing going on during break, I still set my alarm for 6 a.m. and dragged myself out of bed. I figured I'd get to the gym early and avoid the crowds. By 6:20, I was dressed and driving. The gym's about 15 minutes away, mostly back roads through quiet suburban neighborhoods. Nothing unusual ever happens around there. It's a peaceful place to grow up, but honestly kind of dull now that all my childhood friends have moved on. I was listening to background music on YouTube when something unusual caught my attention. Parked at the curb was an ice cream truck. Its engine was off and it had no lights on. It wouldn't have been strange during summer, but this was March, still chilly. Plus, kids were in school. There was no reason for an ice cream truck to be sitting there at 6:30 in the morning. It looked out of place. As I passed it, I slowed down enough to glance into the cab. No one was inside. I turned the corner, but couldn't stop thinking about how weird it felt. It wasn't just the time of year. It was the fact I didn't remember ever seeing an ice cream truck in that area, not even growing up. I eventually let it go and focused on my workout. Afterward, I grabbed something quick to eat and headed home. But as I turned onto the same street, the truck was still there, parked in the exact same spot. That made me stop. This was a neighborhood where residents got irritated if someone parked outside their house for too long. It reminded me of a time when a neighbor snapped at us for parking near her place, while waiting for a friend who lived next door. That's why I fully expected someone to have reported the truck by now. My curiosity got the better of me. Instead of heading straight home, I circled the block for another look. This time, someone was sitting inside. As I passed slowly, the guy in the driver's seat looked right at me. He had a long, pointed nose and a scruffy beard that looked completely unkempt. He gave off a weird vibe, like someone who lived in that truck. It unsettled me. I drove straight home. My parents were both at work, so I had the house to myself. I spent the next few hours doing nothing important. Later that afternoon, I went to check the mail. That's when I saw it again, the same ice cream truck, now parked 3 houses down on the opposite side of the street. I froze. It wasn't facing me, but I knew it wasn't just some coincidence. Had that man followed me home? That was the only explanation. I grabbed the mail and walked back inside, pretending not to notice. Upstairs, I went to a guest bedroom window that had a good view of the street and peeked through the curtain. The truck was still there. I kept an eye on it for a few minutes, but nothing happened. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I couldn't look away. I tried to focus on my laptop, but every 30 minutes or so I'd go back to check. Each time the truck had moved slightly, like the driver was deliberately shifting positions. I didn't know if I should call the police. Nothing had technically happened. I wish I had either called or ignored it completely, but instead I got more curious. My brother's into bird watching, so I found his binoculars and returned to the guest room. When I looked through them, I saw something I'll never forget. The man was still inside, staring back, through his own binoculars. He dropped them as soon as we locked eyes, started the engine, and drove off. I was shaken. That guy had been watching my house for hours. I finally called the police and told them everything. The strange truck, the man inside, the binoculars, the fact that he left the second I saw him. The dispatcher said they'd patrol the area and keep watch since an ice cream truck was easy to spot. When my parents got home, I told them the whole story. They were worried, but told me to try not to stress too much. I was exhausted and eventually fell asleep. Around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I checked the time and sat in bed trying to figure out why. Then I heard music. It was faint at first, so quiet I nearly missed it. But then I recognized it, an ice cream truck jingle. That's when something tapped against my bedroom window. Rocks. Someone was tossing small rocks at the glass. That had to be what woke me. I froze. I wanted to look, but was too afraid to move. Finally, I worked up the courage, crept to the window, and peeked through. There he was, the same man standing in my front yard. Beside him, holding each of his hands, were 2 small figures. Children, I think. I couldn't tell for sure in the dark. I didn't wait. I backed away and ran to wake my dad. By the time we went outside, the man had vanished. Police arrived later. A few days passed with no updates. I went back to school, and my parents promised to stay alert. A month later, my mom called. A pair of 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, had just gone missing about 30 minutes from where we live. My mind flashed back to those 2 small figures beside that man in our yard. It made me feel sick. Had they already been with him that morning? Or did he take them later? I don't have the answers. The only thing that makes sense is that someone capable of kidnapping children doesn't think like normal people. Maybe he came back to scare me, thinking I was onto him. My mom followed up with the police. If anything new comes up, I'll update. This all took place last spring, around 9 months back. I work as a sales consultant at BMW, and my schedule is usually packed. Even when I'm not physically at the dealership, I'm still glued to my phone. Because I constantly need to be available. It sometimes feels like I'm busier during off hours. Part of my job is to pick up every call, especially unknown numbers, in case it's a potential customer. Naturally, this means I end up answering a lot of spam calls, too. I hate it, but it comes with the territory. One night, shortly after 10 p.m., my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have answered right away, but I was already in bed, unwinding. Something about the late hour made me ignore it. No voicemail followed. A few minutes later, though, the same number rang again. I sat up and answered, slightly annoyed but still trying to keep a professional tone. The only thing I could hear was heavy static, this messy, broken noise. I was about to hang up when I noticed something strange underneath it. A voice. I brought the phone closer to my ear and listened. It was my voice. I froze. It wasn't just a voice that sounded like mine. It was me. It was a recording of a conversation I had with a client earlier that same day. It was about test drives, pricing, and availability. Nothing private, but undeniably my words. I hung up immediately. I sat in my bed, staring at my screen, completely thrown off. I wasn't terrified, but something about it deeply unsettled me. I tried to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe the client had recorded the call and called me by mistake. But why would it be from a different number? The next day, just for peace of mind, I called the client back. He answered normally, acted casual, and said he had no clue what I was talking about. I believed him. I pushed the whole thing to the back of my mind. Until that night. Another unknown number rang around the same time. I answered. Just like before, static, and then a recording of another conversation I'd had that day. A completely different one with a different client. Again, only my voice was present, not the client's. That's when it started to truly bother me. Someone was capturing my side of calls. I barely slept. My brain couldn't stop spinning. It kept happening, every night for an entire week. Different numbers, different conversations, same static, same eerie feeling. I started recording the calls. I don't even know why. It just felt necessary. By the fourth night, it was taking a serious toll on me. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, checking my windows. I added locks, left lights on all night, put a chair under my bedroom door handle. I even started taking calls from my car, just so I could watch every angle around me. It sounds paranoid now, but back then, it felt completely logical. Eventually, I went to the police. I told them everything. The officer listened politely, but didn't seem very concerned. He said they'd look into the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. I wasn't convinced they'd follow through. Then, without warning, the calls stopped. For a few days, nothing happened. I should have felt relieved, but I didn't. I felt worse. It made me spiral even more. My mother has schizophrenia, so I've always worried I might inherit something. That week made me feel like I was watching my own mind unravel. I changed my number, which was a hassle, but I couldn't take it anymore. I reconnected with clients and updated everything linked to my old number. Just when I thought it was over, I got another call. Same static, same one-sided recording. This time, instead of staying silent, I spoke up. I said something like, "If this is about money, we can talk. Just tell me what you want." I even gave them my address. I know how reckless that sounds. Believe me, I do. I wasn't thinking straight. But for the first time, I got a response. A voice, digitally altered, said, 11 o'clock, and then hung up. What followed were the most terrifying 4 days of my life. I loaded my handgun and waited in my kitchen. I don't even want to explain all the thoughts I had during those hours. I was prepared for anything, even something irreversible. but nothing happened. 11 o'clock came and went. I fell asleep at the table with my gun still in hand. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the end of it all. No more calls, no more recordings. But the damage was done. It took therapy, time off, and a lot of healing to even feel somewhat normal again. I never figured out who was behind it or how they recorded me. I don't think I ever will. But to this day, I live with the fear that I'm one call away from falling back into that mental hole. Maybe sharing this story will help someone else, or at least help me cope.